I've got a few things to just kind of bring up and clarify.
That was a
For somebody,
long,
no,
yeah.
it's great, dude. I love this stuff. You know I love this stuff. So crossover concept. If you're watching,
Yep.
I just trace this out where there's an X. If you're at home, take a piece of paper, turn it. What is that? Is that hamburger? That's hamburger style, right? Turn it hamburger
Sure.
style.
Yeah.
And make a cross across the paper, and on the one that goes from left to right, it starts high and goes down. Right fat, and on the one that starts low and goes high, right carbohydrate. This is a gross simplification, but this is what we're talking about when we're talking about respiratory exchange ratio, RER or RQ, as it's also known as respiratory quotient. And what happens is if you assume that you start out with a low heart rate to the left and you increase your heart rate going up to the right, you're increasing your workload, your body's doing more work. There's a crossover point where your body stops burning fat as a major fuel. The carbohydrates that are on the rise, they start out really low and then they go higher. That supplants all the fat that you're burning, and that crossover is different in everybody, and it's different in the way you train. So what you're describing as having a normal athlete would have a crossover point at 65-70% of their VO2 max, that might be pretty low as far as the amount of work that their body is doing and the amount of workload that they're actually producing. When somebody gets fat adapted, and what you're saying is, a fat adapted athlete can burn primarily fat, have an RQ of 8.85 or less, up to 85% of their VO2 max. What you're saying is you can perform at a way higher level, doing way more work, taking in more oxygen, and your body is burning way more fat doing it. That's
Yep.
all. That's pure win. Your performance is going to go up. And I've got a few other
100%.
points there, but yeah, any thoughts there?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. This is number one, it shows that fat oxidation from a theoretical conclusion perspective, which, if we're being real, any study that is making a conclusion on performance without having performance outcome is a theoretical conclusion. And a majority of the studies in the ketogenic space right now are theoretical conclusions,
Yep. Okay. Perfect.
right? They're all looking at metabolic numbers and then saying bad for performance,
Yep.
right? And what we just
Ridiculous.
proposed is all of you are wrong, because if you reapply these new formulas to the data that you have, I'm pretty sure that all of those numbers would fall in range and it would turn. And here's the consistent theme that I want to make sure everybody gets. I'm not saying it's better. What I'm saying is I'm pretty sure, because one of the things that we hope people will do with this paper is take these formulas and apply them to their current data sets or do new studies using these formulas.
Yep.
Because what I want to see from a metabolic, from a movement economy perspective, you talk about betting on outcomes. My bet on the outcome of people adopting these formulas is that we will find that performance from a metabolic perspective is no different.
Or or higher.
Could be higher, but at least no different.
Yeah.
Because the
Okay.
performance outcomes, when we look at all of the different modalities of exercise and athletic events, the performance outcomes are all coming back no different.
Got
And
it.
I would
Okay.
expect that the metabolic outcomes at the worst would be no different, if not better.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
I've got two
So,
other. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. So that's that. Another thing I want to know, this just came out, I believe, last week. Professor Noakes was part of a study. They defined and identified a reverse crossover point. This is fascinating. 6+ hours of endurance activity, the body switches back to predominantly fat.
Wow.
So somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half, depending on what kind of work you're doing, and 6 hours, there's a crossover where it goes from mostly carbs, or where that goes from fat to carbs, it goes back from carbs to fat if you work long enough, right? So I just thought that was fascinating because we can see how it goes back and forth based on what we're doing.
Is that due to the storage capacity of fat versus carbohydrate, where maybe you're burning through your carbohydrate and then your body has really no choice but to go back to burning fat?
I don't remember. I didn't read the entire study. I don't remember if they proposed any mechanisms or if they
Got
gathered
it.
any data to make any connections there. But I mean, it's likely that's part of it.
Got it.
Um, the thing about it though, that's really interesting, and this is eventually I want to talk about the biases. We just talked about one major bias, a couple major biases in science. Um, but there's a lack of understanding in science, I think, that has bled into social media, books. I don't know. I don't know how to, the zeitgeist, I guess, of health and fitness. Um, and that is how we define metabolic flexibility. And what I'm finding, and I'm still working through this theory and concept. It may be another technical report that we put out because the more I dig into it and the more I look at it, I'm going to make a statement here that's going to potentially raise some eyebrows or make people go, huh? Um, Optimal, this is a theory. My theory right now, until I can prove it, hopefully one of these days, is that optimal metabolic flexibility is not possible with food intake. It requires an absence of external sources of energy.
Mm.
So when we eat, every single time we eat something, we interrupt and suppress every single system and process in the body that improves metabolic flexibility. Right? So think about that for a second. What does that mean? That means if anybody's telling you to eat carbs to improve your metabolic flexibility, they're wrong. If anybody is telling you to eat a ton of meat or a ton of fat to fuel your exercise, they're wrong. And this is the one that got me. This is the one that made me go, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. I've been telling people forever, you need to be fat fueled, fat adapted. There is a difference between being fat adapted, as in accessing the fuel I have on my body, and being fat adapted to eating a lot of fat so that my body can burn fat. Because here's the deal. Metabolic flexibility is about, if we look at the entire picture, it's about the production of energy substrates, right? How does my body get fat and get glucose and glycogen? The utilization of them, how does my body burn them? And the access to them, how do I get them into my system, right? So when we talk about metabolic flexibility, we're talking about only internal processes, which means I can only get everything that I need from body fat and stored muscle glycogen. That's it. The minute I eat something, we have this thing called oxidative priority, right? So anything external is prioritized and has to be processed in order before anything internal. So if I eat fat off of a pig, I'm getting fat and that's great. But what doesn't come with that fat? There's no glycerol. It's not a triglyceride. It's a fatty acid, which means I'm not getting glycerol, which means eating fat isn't going to fuel the glycogen requirement that I need, like my body fat will. Body fat provides fatty acids. It provides glycerol, right? Those are the two main things that we need to help replenish and restore our glycogen stores and glucose in our blood. So if I'm burning body fat, I can exercise better. If I'm eating fat, I'm not getting everything I need. I'm only getting one. I'm not getting two. And so that's me. I said that to myself and I said, wait a second, body fat doesn't, or external fat is an interruption to metabolic flexibility, just like carbs are. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. I got to think about this for a second. Like this is, wait a minute. So I've been thinking about this for weeks and trying to work through this whole process. But everything that comes back to is saying, hey, wait a second. If you want to be optimal in your performance, we want to optimize metabolic flexibility. In order to optimize metabolic flexibility, we have to start looking at food as a recovery mechanism, not a fueling mechanism.
Mm.
You don't need to eat in order to exercise. You need to eat in order to prepare your body for the next exercise. It's a whole different ball game about a whole bunch. I got a whole outline of things that this is. The more I talk, I'm getting sweaty right now thinking about it because it changes so many things about the way we look at sports nutrition.